Pontiac started out to build a sports car, but what they came up with was one of America's most successful muscle cars, the Trans Am. This is the 30th anniversary Pontiac Trans Am. It's one of the premier muscle cars in the world today. It combines power, agility, comfort, and beauty in a package that also offers fuel efficiency and safety. This combination was unheard of just a few years ago. Traditionally, the muscle car buyer has always been forced to choose between performance and fuel efficiency, agility, and creature comforts. But today's Trans Am is one of the best examples of what a muscle car can be. It is a combination of the best performance, comfort, and safety ideas of the past 35 years. Building a car like this takes commitment, years of development, and a dedication to building great cars. Pontiac's Firebird was introduced late in 1967. And it wasn't what their general manager, John DeLorean, wanted to build. His vision was for a two-seat Sportster called the Banshee, after a Pontiac experimental car of years earlier. Instead, the GM brass forced Pontiac to build their pony car on the same platform as the Camaro.
The popular conception for the first-generation Firebird was that it was simply a copycat of the Camaro. Well, that really was not the case. Pontiac did a very good job of differentiating the Firebird from the Camaro. They saw the Firebird as more of a sports car instead of a muscle car.
The Camaro and the Firebird hit town just as a new American road racing series was becoming immensely popular. Capitalizing on the huge popularity of the pony cars, the Sports Car Club of America had created a new racing series called Trans Am, and it was made for these cars to compete head-to-head. Jim Wangers was responsible for Pontiac's advertising during this time. He recalls Trans Am racing's popularity with car buyers.
And the Trans Am racing series was at that time getting a little bit of momentum. It was gathering some public interest. It was sort of an introduction to the American car into the activity or the organized activity of road racing.
The 1969 Firebird Trans Am was named for the popular SCCA racing series, but they weren't really road racers.
Well, we had absolutely no intention of going into that activity. We just liked the name, Trans Am.
In a few short years, the Trans Am racing series had run its course, but Pontiac's Trans Am has continued to endure through 4 generations of Firebirds. During its over 30-year lifetime, Pontiac has sold over 2 million Trans Ams. The Trans Am has earned fame as a character in some of America's most popular movies. It served as the pace car for the world's most prestigious races. And through the years, Pontiac's engineers have continued to refine this car until the Trans Am has become a world-class muscle car. And what must be its greatest achievement, the Trans Am has created a following as strong and loyal as any car ever built, a loyalty which spans generations.
The Trans Am was really an opportunity for the guys and gals who were maybe a little too young for the GTO in the late 60s to get the feeling of what it was really like to have a kind of a true American muscle car.
Stay with us for the whole story of how Pontiac excitement created the Trans Am on the American muscle car. The early and mid-'60s had been good years for Pontiac. GM's poorest performing division during the 50s had risen from near extinction to the 3rd largest selling car company in America in just a few years. All because of a carefully created racy image and cars that backed up that image with real performance. The man who engineered Pontiac's rebirth into GM's excitement division was the legendary Bunky Knudsen.
So when Mr. Knudsen came in mid-year 1956 with a 5-year period. He was to turn that division around within 5 years. One of the first things that he said is, we're going to change the personality of this car, and the way we're going to do it is we're going out to beat somebody. We're going racing.
With this mandate from Knudsen, Pontiac's engine shop went on a war footing. Very soon, Pontiac started winning on Sunday and selling like crazy the rest of the week.
Fireball Roberts in number 3 Pontiac. Roberts leads.
But the automobile business in America is all about numbers. And by the mid-'60s, the biggest sales numbers in history were being rung up by America's first pony car, the Ford Mustang.
Mustang. Move into the cool world of Mustang.
Between 1964 and 1966, Ford sold almost 2 million Mustangs. The message was clear. Across town at General Motors, Pontiac Division General Manager John DeLorean sounded the wake-up call.
Since 1964, over 600,000 former GM customers bought Mustangs.
Chevrolet reacted first, bringing out the Camaro at the beginning of the 1967 model year. Pontiac, meanwhile, was still pushing its two-seater roadster concept called the Banshee.
John DeLorean, who was running Pontiac at the time, wanted his own two-seat sports car, not unlike the Corvette. Well, the GM brass didn't particularly like the idea, neither did Chevrolet.
At that time, the two-place market in this country was dominated by the Chevrolet Corvette. And the corporation, with good rational thinking, said, why should we go in competition with ourselves? And that Pontiac had better go to work and take what was already developed as the Chevrolet Camaro and do enough things to it to change it into a Pontiac.
So using the 67 Camaro shell as a pattern, Pontiac rolled out its version of the pony car, the Firebird. It hit the streets 6 months after the Camaro, and the two cars looked a lot alike. But where it counted, Pontiac's engineers made sure this car was no clone.
DeLorean insisted that all Firebirds be lowered 1 inch from the Camaro, insisted that all Firebirds have wide oval tires on them, which was in those days a 70 series tire. And the car did look macho, it looked tough, it looked sporty.
The Firebirds for 1967 and 68 sported a number of styling touches that set them apart from their sister Camaros, the most noticeable of which was the Pontiac split grille and the wraparound front bumper. The Firebird's most endearing quality, particularly for muscle car fans, was its acceleration. The Firebird's top-of-the-line 400 cubic inch engine with 335 horsepower and gobs of torque would plant you back in the seat better than any 67 Mustang or Barracuda, and would hold its own nicely with Chevy's SS396 Camaro. Plus, thanks to John DeLorean's original vision for the Firebird, they were also excellent handling cars.
Pontiac did a very good job of differentiating the Firebird from the Camaro. Therefore, you saw unique suspension tuning, a variety of different engines. It was more of an upscale car than the Camaro was.
In the muscle car world, handling was a new word. All mega-motored muscle cars could lay rubber a mile long, but this new breed of pony car could turn corners too. This came in handy when the Sports Car Club of America created a new event which showcased pony cars called the Trans-American Sedan Racing Series, or Trans Am for short. The competition was furious, and the series was massively popular. Ford, Chevrolet, and even American Motors were all in it up to their axles. Going into 1969, if you were a car maker and you weren't into Trans Am racing, you had a problem. Pontiac didn't necessarily want to go Trans Am racing, but they always recognized the value of a strong name. So when their new upmarket Firebird for 1969 was ready to roll out, they decided to call it Trans Am. There was one minor issue, though. The Firebird's standard 400 cubic inch engine was a little too big for Trans Am racing. The limit was 5 liters, or 305 cubic inches. The motoring press took issue with this little detail.
The automotive press of the day was fairly harsh on the car. They didn't understand the concept of having a pony car named after one of the more popular SCCA racing series of the day, and in fact not be eligible to compete in that series.
But they just beat this car to death.
It didn't matter that the Trans Am looked great, handled great, and had gobs of power. The press just wasn't buying a car named Trans Am that wasn't legal for Trans Am racing.
The Trans Am just absolutely went nowhere. In fact, it was so badly received, they only built, as many people know, 697 of these cars.
By the end of the '69 model year, Pontiac had managed to make enough Trans Ams to qualify the car for SCCA competition, just barely. But whether the car could survive without actually competing in Trans Am racing was another story. We'll get to that story when the American Muscle Car returns. The Pontiac Trans Am, still reeling from the dissing it had gotten from the press when it was introduced, was trying to get into the racing game. The problem was, Pontiac didn't have any engines that were even remotely legal for Trans Am competition.
Pontiac did embark on an engine development program to try to create an engine to make the car eligible to run in the Trans Am series. The Ram Air 5 303 program underwent some pretty intensive development.
The trouble was there was just no way to de-stroke Pontiac's 400 cubic inch engine to 300 cubic inches and make enough horsepower to be racy. George Siegel currently races a Trans Am in SCCA's Vintage Car Series. He remembers Pontiac's difficulties in getting the Ram Air 5 on the track.
They had developed a tunnel port head for that motor, just like the tunnel port heads for the Ford 427s. But unfortunately, the 303 didn't make any horsepower, and it made even less torque.
So the Trans Am wars raged on through 1969, and Pontiac was struggling along without a competitive power plant. But the car was a favorite with muscle car fans on the street, and that was the most important thing.
Even though the Trans Am series was predominantly a road racing series, once you got out on the streets and highways of America, it was pretty much a drag racing world. So that while the Trans Am wasn't necessarily a true road course competitor, it was a great drag car because it had tremendous acceleration.
Pontiac's 400 never suffered for horsepower, but the Trans Am's standard Ram Air 3 engine kicked it up a few notches. The Ram Air 3 package added better breathing exhaust manifolds and a cold air system which opened the Firebird's hood scoops directly into the carburetor. And if that wasn't enough, you could choose the Ram Air 4 option, which was the ultimate Pontiac performance engine. This stump puller used a different cam and carburetor and some lovely round port cylinder heads to make additional horsepower.
If you can't race, then you better make one really neat street car. That was the idea behind the Trans Am.
The Firebird really began to establish its own unique identity in 1969. With its first body restyle and a long list of luxury options. Firebird owners could deck their cars out with such non-racing goodies as air conditioning for $376, rally gauges for $84, leather and vinyl trim for $199, a power driver's seat for $74, and tinted windows for $33.
It has factory air conditioning, it has the power steering cooler, it has power steering, power brakes. It's really loaded with options. When I bought the car, though, I liked the idea that it was loaded with options. I wanted a car that had factory air. I wanted a 4-speed car, and this was a 4-speed originally. And, of course, I wanted the 400 engine.
Trans Am was the Firebird's top option. The Trans Am package sold for $725 with the Ram Air 3 engine, or about $1,100 with the full-tilt Ram Air 4 motor. This package included either the 4-speed manual or 3-speed turbo-hydromatic transmission, rally wheels, power front disc brakes, 355-to-1 rear axle ratio, heavy-duty shocks and springs, fiberglass belted tires, and a 1-inch stabilizer bar. The Trans Am option also included front fender vents, a working rear spoiler, full-length body stripes, and special identification decals. Despite what the press might have thought about the car, it was one of the most distinctive and best-running Pontiacs ever made. '70 would be a much different year for the Trans Am in sales and in respect from the motoring establishment. Stay with us, and we'll take you there on the American Muscle Car. The new Firebirds hit the showrooms in February 1970. They were a bit late, but they were worth waiting for. The new body style was spectacular. And when decked out in the Trans Am's American racing colors, the whole package said, "Where's the racetrack?" In the Trans Am's second year, Pontiac continued to do what they always do with a new car. They made it better.
Herb Adams was actually I believe he was the engineer that came up with the Trans Am concept. He knew from his racing efforts that if you put a little bit stiffer springs, big fat sway bars, wide tires, you could improve the handling. One of these off the showroom floor in 1970 would pull about 0.88 G's, lateral G's cornering. So it was a pretty potent performer.
The 1970 engines remain the same as the previous year, but the Ram Air 4 engine still the bad boy in the lineup. It would propel the 3,550-pound car to a 14.3-second quarter mile and run 0 to 60 in under 6 seconds. Inside, the Firebird was redesigned into something resembling a fighter plane's cockpit. There were bucket seats, a console, and a leather-wrapped steering wheel. A full set of rally gauges and a tack were installed in the engine-turned dash. The whole effect was rich and racy. And still without a competitive engine, Pontiac went Trans Am racing again. But 1970 was an unhappy year.
Pontiac had given Terry Goodsall some $200,000 to start up a team. He hired Jerry Titus away from Ford. They got started late. They were behind in their engine development program, and things just generally didn't go well for them. They had not finished any races up till the point where Titus, unfortunately, was killed at Elkhart Lake in Wisconsin.
The Trans Am never won a race in the series for which it was named, but that was never the point.
All we wanted was the name. We thought the name was, very exciting and said exactly what we kind of wanted to say about this car.
The next 3 years saw little change in the Trans Am's body style. But like everywhere in the auto industry, the new government controls on exhaust emissions were having an effect. The big engine in the 71 through 73 Trans Am was the all-new 455 HO, with lower compression and less horsepower.
In 1971, GM mandated that all their engines had to run on regular unleaded gasoline, which meant a pretty drastic drop in compression ratio. Of course, you drop compression ratio, you lose performance.
The unlimited horsepower party appeared to be over. But like the last couple at the dance, Pontiac and the Trans Am refused to leave the dance floor. Starting in 1973 and continuing through 1974, there was a bright spot at Pontiac amid all the muscle car gloom. It was the new 455 Super Duty engine. This was to be the standard bearer for American performance for years to come. 1974 and the years ahead would be interesting years for America's last muscle car. We'll tell you about it when the American Muscle Car returns. The muscle car buyer looked out over a bleak landscape in the years after 1973. The street Hemis were gone. So were the Stage 1 Buicks, the 428 Cobra Jet Fords, and the big block Chevelles. Even the Corvette was a shadow of its former self. But there was one car left that could still give you the old feeling. Under its hood, there was a throbbing 455 cubic inch power plant. On top of the hood was a very large, angry bird. It was the 74 455 Super Duty Trans Am. And if anyone thought the muscle car era was over, well, Pontiac hadn't gotten the word. The new federal bumper regulations caused the designers to give the Firebird a nose job this year. But the rest of the car was pretty okay with the car-buying public, so Pontiac left it alone. What caused the world to rush to Pontiac's door and buy almost 5 times as many Trans Ams in '74 as in the previous year was the reason people bought the car in the first place. Pure, flat-out acceleration.
73, 74 Super Duties really were the best performing Trans Ams built, and that includes the 69 and 70 Ram Air 4 cars. It has a cast iron intake, which is unusual. Pontiac tended to put aluminum intakes on their hottest engines, as did most manufacturers. Makes use of a special quadrajet 4-barrel. The cars were good straight off the showroom floor for mid 13-second quarter miles at 100 plus. So they're all in all very, very unusual engines and quite rare. I think only somewhere around 600 total were ever built.
In 1993, I got lucky, and with this car, I won the World Championship in the stock division. Its best time that year was a 13:05 at 106 miles an hour on street radials. I like the power, I like the looks, I just like everything around about it. I think it's a great all-around car.
Pontiac sold over 10,000 Trans Ams in 74, 27,000 in 75, 46,000 in 76, almost 120,000 in 1979, and it just keeps going.
There was a terrible performance lapse through the early 80s. In the mid-1980s, that started to change, however. The factories had been working hard on electronic fuel injection. By the mid-80s, all that work was starting to pay off, and you saw performance and the fun-to-drive aspect of performance cars starting to rise again.
Today's Trans Am draws its lineage straight from the muscle machines of the 60s. Pontiac has always known that any car they call Trans Am has a lot to live up to.
In order to get this car, I had to trade a 65 Tri-Power GTO convertible. And it was a real difficult choice, but then again, like I said, this was from my senior year of high school, and it's such a unique car, the history of this car and everything, that I just couldn't pass it up.
Nobody can say why some cars come and go, and some stay around. But muscle car buyers are pretty good at distinguishing the genuine from the fakes. The Trans Am has always been an honest muscle car. It had the stripes and scoops and spoilers and all the gimmicks, but it also had the power to back it all up. And it was the one muscle car that kept the flame lit during the dark times. It lives today as a testament to what a car can be when its builders never stop until the car is the best they can build.
The statement that the muscle car lives is exactly that. It's a reflection on their heritage. And Pontiac has a right to make that kind of a reflection, because certainly they, of all people, have the heritage of true muscle cars and true, seriously performing pony cars.
Thanks for watching the American Muscle Car. And please remember, don't crush them, restore them. Today, they call it Pontiac Excitement. In 1963, it was called Super Duty. Whatever you call it, it's a fantastic ride. America has always had a love affair with the automobile, and no other car company has done more to provide Americans with ways to express that love than Pontiac. Today, Pontiac is GM's excitement division. But there was a time when Pontiacs weren't exciting. In fact, they were boring. Pontiac buyers didn't want fancy cars. They wanted cars that would run forever.
Their advertising slogan was a General Motors masterpiece, built to last 100,000 miles. In fact, lots of them did last 100,000 miles, and when people had a car that they knew was going to last that long, they weren't in a rush to come back and replace it.
Everything about Pontiac said stodgy, old style, and worst of all, slow. By the mid-50s, Pontiac had fallen to last place in sales among GM's divisions. and was actually in danger of going out of business. But in 1956, a miraculous transformation started within Pontiac, which over the next few years turned these boring old cars into the sleekest, fastest rides in America. This transformation was engineered by a man regarded by many as the most brilliant automobile executive of the 20th century, Semin E. Bunky Knudsen. Jim Wangers was just starting his career as Pontiac's advertising wizard at about the same time. He recalls Knudsen's credentials.
Mr. Knudsen was an inveterate racer. He just loved auto racing. He was an engineer by education. He got into the production engineering, into manufacturing. He was not really a marketer, but he liked cars.
Most of all, Bunky Knudsen had a knack for knowing what the car-buying public wanted. Knudsen also knew, long before most of the movers and shakers in Detroit, that the future of the auto industry was in the hands of a new wave of younger buyers who wanted cars that delivered a whole lot more than just basic transportation. Knudsen was determined that Pontiacs would be those cars. Under Knudsen's direction, a new image was created for Pontiac. This was the wide-track era, and no cars were ever so creatively styled or aggressively marketed.
The only car with wide-track wheels, which widen the stance, not the car itself.
Wide track became kind of a symbol for the new face of Pontiac.
A big part of Pontiac's problem was its low-performance engines. Knudsen had a fix for that, too. He created a task force of young engineers and sent them on a mission to put more punch into Pontiac's engines. In less than 5 years, they had more than doubled their horsepower and had also created a catalog full of brute-strength driveline parts to handle this extra power. Some of these parts never made it to the production line and weren't listed in any salesman's book. You had to be one of a very select group of racers to even know about them. Yet they became some of the most famous high-performance parts ever made. Today, the cars from this era are remembered by the name given to this engine development program. It was called Super Duty. How these magnificent cars propelled Pontiac from near extinction to the number 3 selling automobile in America is an amazing success story. Stay with us as Bunky Knudsen makes his entrance at Pontiac and things start to speed up on the American muscle car. With the clock ticking on Pontiac's future, Bunky hit the ground running. He knew Pontiac was long overdue for a complete makeover. But thanks to GM's styling cycles, Knudsen couldn't change body styles for at least 2 years. He could have an immediate impact on performance, though. His goal was to squeeze 100 more horsepower out of Pontiac's new little V8 engine. Pontiac had entered the modern V8 era for the first time in 1955 with a 287 cubic inch mill, which made all of 180 horsepower. By 1957, this engine had been bored and stroked to 347 cubic inches, and horsepower had increased to 270. There was also a special 10.25-to-1 compression version, which made an amazing 315 horsepower. With this engine, the 57 Pontiacs were over 3 seconds faster, 0 to 60, than the 55 models. Pontiac's engine development program started by redesigning the cylinder heads for improved breathing. A key figure in this effort was the legendary Mac McKellar.
There was a program on to make it breathe, and that bore fruit in 1957, actually, just about the time that Bunky Knudsen came. That program was ready, and so it really helped turn the 57 into probably one of the hottest street cars on the road at that time.
Loaded with new horsepower, Knudsen now wanted to win a few races. For help, he called on some famous names in the racing business, like Ray Nichols and Smokey Yunick. Some of these people were a bit skeptical.
He got a hold of Smokey one day and he said, Smokey, we're going to go racing. He says, we're going to get very serious about participating in late model stock car racing, Smokey supposedly said, what are you going to race with? He says, well, a Pontiac, of course, at which point Smokey chuckled.
The chuckles didn't last long, however. When the Pontiac showed up at the 1957 Daytona Speed Weeks, they scored overwhelming victories in both the Flying Mile competition and the big Grand National stock car race. How these stock Pontiacs got so fast in such a short time was a mystery to everyone but Bunky and his engineers. For the Daytona race, they'd tooled up a special NASCAR version of the 347, sporting triple Rochester two-barrel carburetors and a few other stock parts.
They selected a lot of outside manufacturers, aftermarket manufacturers, Edelbrock, for example, Iskandarian, for example, to build special parts for these Pontiac engines. The minute they had the proper part developed the way they wanted, they'd slap a Pontiac part number on it, and you could get it out of the parts department at any of your local Pontiac dealers.
Pontiac didn't have to rely on outside sources for long. Knudsen's engine lab was coming up to speed, and by 1958, there was a whole shelf full of high horsepower parts available to the car buyer. The block was punched out again, this time to 370 cubic inches. Tri-power carburation was a $94 option and also included special 10.5 compression cylinder heads and a high-lift camshaft to make 300 horsepower at 4,600 RPM. The next step up was a big one. For $500, you could get the new Rochester fuel injection setup, which used the same heads and camshaft and made 310 horsepower. The top-of-the-line racing goodies were called the Trophy 395A package. In addition to special heads and camshaft, the package included low-restriction exhaust manifolds and a Rochester 4-barrel carburetor. It cranked out 330 horsepower at 5,200 RPM and was bargain priced at $320. Pontiac repeated its success at Daytona in 1958, and it was becoming a pretty exciting car. But the country was in a recession, and car sales were down everywhere. The sales slump hit Pontiac and Bunky Knudsen especially hard.
1958 was the all-time low sales year for Pontiac in modern history. They sold a little over 240,000 cars as a division, which was incredible. And of course it was very bothersome to Mr. Knudsen because his 5-year period was rapidly coming to an end.
But waiting in the wings were some truly eye-catching cars, the 59s. These were the cars that would start Pontiac on the road to recovery. Stay with us as we go wide-tracking on the American Muscle Car. '59 was a milestone year for Pontiac styling. If you like big cars with fins, that is. Along with a nice set of tail fins, the designers gave Pontiac two styling elements that have become synonymous with Pontiac: its split grille and the wide track stance.
Contrary to what a lot of people would like to think, wide track was not an engineering development. It was not conceived to make the car a better handler or better balanced or better ride. It was purely a styling exercise.
Even with wide track styling, performance continued to be the key word in Knudsen's makeover strategy. The engine lab punched out Pontiac's power plant again in 1959. This time to 389 cubic inches. The hottest version now made 345 horsepower, an astonishing 112 horsepower gain in just 3 years. By now, the Super Duty engine program was on a huge roll. With car builders like Smokey Yunick and drivers like Fireball Roberts, Pontiacs thundered to victory at race after race. In February, stock car racing entered the big leagues. The 1959 Daytona 500 would be the first race on NASCAR's new state-of-the-art high bank track. qualifying speeds were averaging over 135 miles per hour. But the Pontiacs were capable of running at least 10 miles an hour faster than this.
Rim riding at 145 miles an hour, Fireball Roberts has passed 34 cars in one of the most amazing rides ever seen on a racetrack.
Despite its obvious speed advantage, Pontiac didn't win the Daytona 500 this year. But 100,000 race fans saw a sight they would never forget. Pontiacs running rings around Ford, Chevy, and Chrysler. For Bunky Knudsen and his engine wizards, it was the reward they'd been waiting for.
I can remember watching that, one of the first 25-mile races on television. I guess that was the first one that was televised. And my stuff was on those engines, so that was quite a thrill, you know.
Almost 400,000 Pontiacs sold in 1959. Thanks to fresh styling, awesome power, and a full-bore marketing push, which redefined Pontiac as young America's performance car. Even though the production line Pontiacs didn't have all the Super Duty parts, the ad guys made sure you knew that those race-winning cars were powered by the same engine you could get in a new Bonneville. Sort of.
The term Super Duty, believe it or not, never got used in advertising. You'd use the term like especially equipped or, with special performance options and so on, but never used the term Super Duty. That was strictly a kind of an internal term.
By now, Super Duty parts were finding their way onto the streets and the drag strips. Jim Wangers thought getting Pontiac involved in drag racing was a great marketing idea.
I was able to convince the Super Duty guys that they should start to take some of these parts and make them available to the drag racers, because stock car drag racing was really coming into its own.
Wangers even got into the act himself. He helped build a factory super stock racing team at a Detroit dealership called Royal Pontiac. With Wangers driving, Royal's Hot Chief Catalina won the stock eliminator class at the 1960 U.S. Nationals. Going into 1961, Pontiac had momentum. Being out front was fun. And the only thing more fun was having a bigger lead. Stay with us as the Super Duty program shifts into high gear on the American muscle car. That was then. This is now. The era of the fins was over. The 1961 Pontiacs were smaller and almost 400 pounds lighter than the 60 models, with a complete body restyle which brought back the split grille front-end look. Absolutely no trace of Pontiac's dull and boring image remained. During the past 3 years, the stylists had poured luxury into this car until it rivaled Buick and Cadillac for beauty and comfort. Pontiac's interiors now featured leather-trimmed upholstery, a fully instrumented dash, and a full sheet of luxury options. Power brakes were available for $43, six-way power seats for $97, power windows for $104, and the Magic automatic headlight dimmer for $43. Air conditioning set you back a heavy $430, but you could save big on cruise control for just $16. But even though the cars were becoming luxurious, Knudsen continued to dance with the ones that brought him to the party, those powerful engines. After 5 years of R&D, Pontiac's engineers delivered the magic bullet that Knudsen had been waiting for, the 421 Super Duty engine. This was the crown jewel of the Super Duty program, and it was a no-holds-barred racing engine. With a Ford steel crank and rods, the McKellar solid lifter cam, special 13-to-1 compression cylinder heads, and 2 Carter AFB 4-barrels on a special aluminum intake manifold, this barn burner was rated at 405 horsepower. The little motor that had started life as a 287 cubic inch boat anchor was now the meanest engine in the auto industry. In the 5th year of Bunky Knudsen's 5-year plan, it had all come together. Pontiacs won 21 of the 51 Grand National events that year, and the factory drag racing teams were dominant. Sales were up, and by 1962, there was no more talk from the GM brass about closing Pontiac down. Now, for the first time, Super Duty engine parts were coming out of the closet. Literally everything from the fan to the flywheel had been redesigned for high performance. Now, having a race-winning Pontiac was just a matter of choosing the right combination of factory parts. The Super Duty drag racers had another speed secret in 1962, lighter cars. We'll tell you all about it when the American Muscle Car returns. Pontiac had everything going its way on the stock car tracks in 1962, even adding a young Roger Penske to their super team. Out on the drag strip, though, Pontiac was caught up in some furious competition. The new buzzword in the super stock pits was aluminum.
We had a handicap because we were heavier, and so we really ought to do something about cutting the weight down on these cars. And so we came up with the incredibly original idea of building some aluminum parts.
Just about everything forward of the firewall could be replaced with aluminum, all with Pontiac factory part numbers, of course. Pontiac racer Bill Blair has restored several aluminum-nosed factory race cars. He has to be careful of the thin metal, even when working on them.
Now you could bend them, change the spark plugs, and you had to reach up under and push the fenders back out.
By now, of course, thanks to Pontiac's drag strip success, the Super Duty Cat was clearly out of the bag, which meant with enough money and the right part numbers, you could have your very own 421 SD Catalina. If you didn't mind getting it in kit form.
You could go to a dealer and order out a Super Duty car. You got the car built with Pontiac's highest production engine, highest performing production engine. Then you proceeded to buy the parts over the parts counter. The block, the crank, the heads, the rods, the pistons, the intake manifold, the exhaust manifold, the valves, everything. And literally assembled it on your own.
Going into 1963, the trend toward lighter cars continued. But there wasn't a part on the car that hadn't been lightened. Except the frame. Enter some truly incredible cars, the Swiss cheese Pontiacs. Drilling a few hundred large holes in your car's chassis might not sound like a good idea to the average car owner, but it was a great way to go faster. Every pound saved made the car quicker, and that's all that counted.
Those cars, I think they got about 40, 50 pounds out of the frame by stamping the holes in it. And Roger Huntington saw it, and he just named it looks like Swiss cheese, and that's the reason they call them Swiss cheese cars.
But the most awesome Super Duty car ever built is this one. This is the 1963 421 Super Duty Tempest. 13 of these cars were built with aluminum front ends and a special transaxle called the Power Shift transmission. These little Tempests could run in the low 10s at almost 140 miles per hour, but you had to know how to drive them.
You come out about a car length and you fill the car, take a hold, and then you can go ahead and open it wide open. And from then on, all you did was pull the lever.
The Super Duty Tempest was the last blast of all-out racing technology from the Super Duty Group, which was about to receive a surprise from management.
In November of 1962, just a little less than 3 months later, General Motors dropped a bomb on all of their divisions and on the entire racing community, and informed everybody that they were actively withdrawing from any participation in motorsports.
With this decision, Pontiac's Super Duty program ceased to exist overnight. But thanks to the momentum from the Super Duty cars, two wonderful things happened. The first, of course, is that Pontiac survived. The other is the car which picked up the excitement of the Super Duty cars and took it to the streets, the 64 GTO.
So what they forced Pontiac to do was to take their performance off the track and put it on the street.
By the time the first GTO rolled onto the streets, Bunky Knudsen had left Pontiac to become the president of General Motors. But Pontiac lovers everywhere will tell you that Super Duty still lives. It's a part of Pontiac's heritage, just like Wide Track. Bunky Knudsen's 6 years at Pontiac did more than rescue the division. It gave them a corporate mission they still pursue today: excitement. Thanks for watching, and please don't crush them, restore them. Auto racing in America didn't start with the first car built. It started with the second one. And there's a good chance that both these cars were Fords. It was slippery. It cut through the wind like a hot knife through butter. It had a very big engine, an engine that would run on the red line all day. And it was made for one purpose: to chase the mighty Dodge and Plymouth Hemi cars off the high banks of America's stock car tracks. Ford even gave it a name which conjured up images of unreal speeds: Talladega. The Torino Talladega was the last word in Ford Motor Company's high-performance development during the unlimited horsepower wars of the 60s. The Talladega and its cousin, the Mercury Cyclone Spoiler II, were capable of running over 200 miles an hour on the high-bank stock car tracks. Their aerodynamic front ends and their fast-back roof lines gave them a clear advantage over their arch rivals, the Dodges and Plymouths. In 1969, with the all-new Boss 429 engine under the hoods, the Ford and Mercury teams simply walked away from the feared Chrysler Hemis. Tim Wellborn has strong memories of the battles between Ford and Chrysler.
Ford came in and they were behind maybe a little bit, but they came with an arrow nose on their car, and they went faster. So what happened? Chrysler had to counter, so they came with a Daytona and a Superbird and kind of one-upped on that, and pretty soon it got pretty wild. In fact, these cars got too fast too quick.
Ford didn't build the Talladega because they wanted to see one in every driveway in America. The Talladega was simply a 600 horsepower sales tool. Ford. Chances are, if you had gone to your local Ford dealer in the summer of 1969 and asked for a test ride in a Talladega, there wouldn't have been one on his lot. Instead, your salesman would have offered you a ride in one of these: a 1969 Torino GT with a high-performance 390, or this Fairlane Cobra with a fearsome 428 Cobra jet mill, or a half dozen other incredible rides that were sitting in his showroom. Every model was an ultimate street machine, except for the Talladega. The Talladega was made for the racetracks. The Torino Talladega was the latest in a long line of fast Fords, which traced its ancestry back to this car, the 1956 Fairlane. Through the years, the Fairlane had seen duty as Ford's top-of-the-line beauty, an economy car, and a mega-motored muscle car. In its ultimate evolution as the Torino Talladega, it ushered in a new era of aerodynamic performance, and it revolutionized stock car racing. The story of the Fairlane and the Talladega is a big chapter in the story of stock car racing and Ford's involvement in racing for a quarter century. So we'll start our story where it all began, when the American muscle car returns. In the mid-50s, stock car racing was becoming a high-visibility, high-dollar sport. There was a connection between winning and selling, and Ford understood this connection better than anyone else. About this time, Ford became aware of two gentlemen who would become very important to their racing future, John Holman and Ralph Moody. Lee Holman remembers how his father John first teamed up with Ford to build race cars.
Ford had a racing team in Charlotte that was Peter DePaulo Engineering, but they weren't very successful. And they looked around for a manager, and my father was working for Bill Stropp at the time in California. And they offered him the job to come out to the East Coast and become the team manager, and the cars were instantly successful. They started winning every race they went to.
In 1956, factory Fords won 27 convertible races and another 13 wins in the hardtop division with the all-new Fairlane. The next year, the Fairlane achieved the most important corporate milestone of all. It outsold the 57 Chevy by over 150,000 cars. Even an agreement by the major automakers to curtail their racing activity did little to stop the growth of racing.
General Motors lobbied to have all the manufacturers get out of racing. And so late in 57, they withdrew, Ford Motor Company, GM, and Chrysler all withdrew factory support.
But most people didn't care if the factories were involved or not. They just wanted to watch fast cars race. And they wanted to buy the cars that won the race.
Ford durability wins again in open competition.
By 1963, everything was going Ford's way. Despite furious competition from Dodge and Plymouth, Fords took the first 5 positions in the 1963 Daytona 500. The silver bullet that propelled these cars was the latest and greatest in a long line of Ford super engines, the High-Riser 427. This bulletproof power plant would be the engine to beat for nearly a decade of stock car racing. Ford needed every ounce of horsepower it could get right now. Its race cars were starting to get a little beefy.
In the early 60s, Ford had some pretty big cars. I don't know if you've gone back and seen a 62 or a 63 Galaxy. That's a fairly big brick to push through the air.
The Galaxy weighed in at 4,150 pounds, and it was about as aerodynamic as a school bus. While it was still the fastest thing on the track, thanks to Ford's awesome engines, it was becoming clear that unless the cars went on a diet, they were going to run out of horsepower. To find that extra speed, the race teams called up an old warhorse, the Fairlane. The Fairlane had been plodding along in Ford's lineup as an economy car for the past few years. But in 1966, Ford gave it new life as a tire-burning muscle car. The NASCAR boys were delighted to find that this excellent street muscle car was also a very good race car. All through 1967, the search for more speed was keeping Ford's racers busy. More speed wasn't going to come from under the hood. It was going to come out of the wind tunnel. Stay with us as NASCAR racers cheat the win when the American muscle car returns. There was a new word in the racing lexicon in 1968, fastback. If you weren't racing one, you lost. Fastback roof lines flowed gently from the windshield to the rear deck. Smooth airflow over this part of the car was critical for handling and speed. The 1968 Fairlane Torino was a textbook fastback. In this new aerodynamic world, more speed depended on your ability to punch a smaller hole in the wind. With one look at this car, the race car builders knew they could make it run over 180 miles per hour on the high bank tracks. NASCAR legend Ralph Moody has been an innovator in race car building for over 50 years. His work with fastback roof lines gave Ford a push in the right direction.
We had guys down there that was good with sheet metal and all that stuff, and I'd been talking to Ford about having a fastback car, you know, and to start with, they had a notchback, and they thought that was thing would be the one that run the fastest. for some reason they thought that, and I said, well, you know, that ain't going to be the way it is. It's going to be the, you know, fastback that runs. And we made the first one, and we took that thing over to this executive building out front and had some of the Ford people come out and look at it. Boy, they liked that. You know, that was the first one they had. I drove it over there, and that's what started the aerodynamic stuff in the Torino and the Talladega.
The Torino had a distinct aero advantage over the '68 Plymouth Roadrunner and the Dodge Charger. David Pearson captured his third NASCAR championship in a '68 Torino. And for the Blue Oval team, stock car racing was fun again.
I always tried to, take care of the equipment. I've always heard build them light and turn them tight, so that's what I always tried to do.
In May of 1968, NASCAR broke ground for a new super speedway. It would be 2.66 miles long with 41-degree bank turns. The track was located in a little Alabama town called Talladega. At about the same time, taking shape in Holman and Moody's race shop was a Torino that might just run 200 miles per hour on this new super speedway. Talladega sounded like a pretty good name for this new car.
We developed the long-nosed Talladega front end just to aerodynamically get the car through the wind quicker. The back half of a Talladega is pretty much a standard car, but the front half was highly modified just for aerodynamics.
The Torino Talladega had "Race Me" stamped all over it. Every aerodynamic trick in the book was built into the car, from the flat rear glass to the longer front fenders and flush grille. What they didn't have, they created on the spot.
We made all the nose pieces now. We had a machine that would just press that stuff out. And it made a nice car out of it.
Ford also decided that the Talladega was the perfect platform for their new Boss 429 semi-Hemi engine. Before they could race this car, though, Ford had to convince NASCAR that the Torino Talladega and the Boss 429 engine were standard production items.
Everybody goes on today how many, there was 500 built, and never was. They say there was, but there never was.
Somehow, Ford's handful of hand-built Talladegas satisfied NASCAR. But certifying the Boss 429 engine required a little creativity. 500 1969 Mustangs were stuffed with the Boss 429 engine. And these were paraded before the NASCAR brass as proof that the Boss was an over-the-counter piece. It was thin, but hey, this was stock car racing. Meanwhile, out on the street, the muscle car crowd was feeling the effects of all this racing R&D. We'll check out the street action when the American muscle car returns. Out on the street, the muscle car wars were in full swing, and they were every bit as hot as the war on the track. Ford's racing had resulted in some pretty incredible street cars that looked like, and more importantly, performed like their stock car heroes. One of America's most popular muscle cars was the Fairlane GT. It had been maintaining the Blue Oval reputation for bad boy street cars. It was gorgeous. It had all the neat muscle car amenities, and it was fairly quick with a 390 Hypo engine. But when they needed a little more, Ford reached back and grabbed a lot more. The legendary 427.
The 427 was a nice engine. The medium riser was the one I prefer. It's what's in my car, but it's a nice, mild, drivable engine with so much torque that you can just twist the axles off of a car.
Muscle cars were fun, but racing dictated what was cool on the street. By 1969, the fastback Torino was extremely cool. Muscle car fans were finding out that big horsepower and sexy styling didn't have to come at the expense of comfort and roominess.
Well, I wanted a big block. It was nice to get a big block car, feeling the low-end torque in that. And the body style is nice. It's big enough, but it's not too big. And it has a decent ride for the cars of that era because of the wheelbase.
The Fairlane and its upmarket brother, the Torino, sold over 200,000 units in 1969. And somewhere in that total were a few truckloads of street Talladegas. Maybe your daddy was a Ford dealer. Maybe you lived down the street from Mr. Holman or Mr. Moody. Or maybe you were just lucky. Those were about the only ways you were even going to get a look at the Talladega, much less get your hands on one. The street Talladegas came equipped with Ford's most fearsome street motor, the 335 horsepower Cobra Jet 428. This engine used the super strong 427 block and had a bore of 4.13 inches and a stroke of 3.98 inches. Other goodies included a forged crankshaft, police interceptor connecting rods, forged pistons, and a 481 lift hydraulic camshaft. The CJ made its horsepower with a 10.7 to 1 compression ratio and a Holley 735 carburetor on a cast iron intake manifold. It was less exotic than the racing Boss 429, but on the street, it was the perfect muscle car power plant. The street Talladega was an off-the-rack car. You had your choice of 3 colors: Royal Maroon, Presidential Blue, or Wimbledon White. Only one transmission was available, the C6 automatic. And in classic Ford style, you had your choice of interior colors, as long as it was black. You got all this for $3,685, about what you'd pay for a totally decked-out Torino GT. But Ford never intended to sell many Talladegas, not that they had that many to sell anyway. In fact, the fewer Talladegas Ford sold, the more they had to send to the racing teams, which, incidentally, were doing quite well with them out on the track. We'll check back in with the Stock Car Boys when the American Muscle Car returns. '69 was going to be a good racing year for Ford. How good a year? Even Richard Petty, Plymouth's shining star, was driving at Talladega this year.
Well, I've been trying to lick them. I just decided I'd join them.
Ford opened the season by winning at Riverside and Daytona, but midway through '69, Mopar fired back. Out of their wind tunnel rolled a new shape which stopped everyone, especially the Ford contingent, right in their tracks. Dodge called it Daytona, and it was their 200-mile-per-hour trump card. Outrageous didn't begin to describe it. Where the Talladega's nose drooped, the Daytona's pointed. The Talladega had a little spoiler on the rear deck. This car had an entire wing stuck way up in the airstream. Up and down pit row, the Ford drivers watched and hoped Dodge's gimmick wouldn't work. David Pearson, who was driving at Talladega again that year, was one of the skeptics.
We felt like that little wing they had way up there, like it wouldn't do that much good, but we was wrong. It really did, and it held the car down, more downforce. They could set the angle of it, and get as much spoiler as they wanted.
The Dodge Daytona worked fine on the high banks, and Mopar was back in the hunt for the NASCAR championship. All through the '69 season, the Hemi-powered Dodges and the 429 Fords swapped the lead. But when the points were tallied, David Pearson had won his 3rd driving championship in his Talladega. Ford finished the 1969 season with 26 wins to Dodge's 22. And privately, some in NASCAR wondered how much higher these speeds could get. The answer was not much higher. Going into 1970, there were a lot of weird shapes in the NASCAR garages. The battle lines were drawn for the fastest season in NASCAR history. When the Talladega, the Daytona, and the new Plymouth Superbird started lapping the big bag tracks at over 200 miles per hour, the tire companies, the drivers, and NASCAR agreed that things might be getting out of hand. So in a decision based on driver safety, NASCAR applied the brakes. With one move, they slowed the cars down and leveled the playing field at the same time with a device which governs racing competition to this day, the carburetor restrictor plate.
So we put the restrictor plates on and slow them down, and The whole idea was to get them out of the 210 range, to get them back down to 190 mile an hour bracket. And I think it was a very, very wise idea.
The plate not only lowered big track speeds, it signaled the death of the ultra-exotic race engines, like the Hemi and the Boss 429. At the same time, the rules change imposed huge weight penalties on the Talladega and the other aero cars. After 1970, there would be no more pointy noses, trick wings, or special race engines. NASCAR would race into its next era in lighter cars with smaller engines. The 1970 season was the final chapter in stock car racing's golden age. The world was changing in 1971, and high-performance cars were under attack from all sides. Big public corporations spending millions of dollars on racing was about as politically incorrect as you could get.
Ford had won everything that it could win. It had won Le Mans with the GT40s twice, and it had won Daytona so many times it was silly. It had won Darlington and Charlotte and all of that. We basically owned the racing world. But Henry Ford was called before Congress, and one of the senators or congressmen, whoever was in front of, said, well, you're spending millions of dollars in racing. Maybe if you took some of that money and put it towards economy, that you would have a better thing. And so Henry Ford said, we no longer race.
In fact, we was in California testing at the time, and Ford man, Charlie Gray, was there, and he come up and said, well, Ford just quit racing, just pulled out of racing. And, of course, they just quit, stopped the test right then and loaded up and come on back home.
When Ford pulled the plug on its factory racing efforts in 1971, it ended 25 years of the most intense high-performance research and development ever undertaken by an auto manufacturer. Ford's pullout also ended work on this car, the King Cobra, which was to be the next step beyond the Talladega. Only 3 of these cars were ever made, and 2 survive today. Thanks to the restorers, a handful of these factory race cars still exist to bring back memories of stock car racing's first golden age. Today's stock cars are running almost 200 miles per hour on safer tracks with better tires, driven by people too young to remember the Big Boss 429 Fords. But race fans everywhere owe a lot to the Talladega, those who built them and those who drove them. They did a lot to make stock car racing the greatest afternoon of entertainment in the world.
When you put 40 of these cars out on the racetrack, running right at, like Daytona and Talladega, running right in the mud, running right at 200 miles an hour, now that is a show.
Thanks for watching, and please remember, don't crush them, restore them. These suckers up! Ever had a ride in a truly awesome car? Well, here's your chance in the 427 Cobra. Awesome is such an overused word these days. They use it for everything from bug spray to pancake mix. But sometimes the word applies, particularly in this case. The 427 Cobra is, for want of a better word, awesome. Its raw acceleration, its ability to turn corners at any speed and to stop just as suddenly, puts it among the top 3 or 4 racing cars ever built. On the street, well, there aren't many words to describe it. The 427 Cobra was created in the best American muscle car tradition of taking the biggest engine you could find and putting it in your lightest car. The story of how the Cobra came into being parallels the story of road racing in America, and one man who built a little car company into an American legend, Carroll Shelby.
This is a man who, when he was born, started looking at automobiles. He used to ride his bicycle down to the local racetrack to see what was going on. It was his passion. There's nothing better when a bright man, his passion, his avocation, his vocation are all the same thing. And we all benefited from that because he just loved automobiles.
In the late 50s and early 60s, as road racing was gathering momentum in the U.S., there were a handful of American racers that were helping put the sport on the map. Unfortunately, for American fans, there weren't many American cars to cheer for. Except for a few hand-built specials, most of the racing cars came from Great Britain, Italy, and Germany. Carroll Shelby was intent on doing something about this.
There aren't many men who have come, particularly in recent times, to the forefront of the automobile industry and built their own car and done it successfully. There's a lot of men on the side of the road who built their own car and done it unsuccessfully. Carroll Shelby was successful.
Shelby's Cobra was born in England in the early 50s as the AC Bristol with a 90 horsepower four-cylinder engine. But Shelby had a vision of a sports car that was a little more potent. By the time he was done, the Bristol had a new name, Cobra, and it now packed some real heat.
When Carroll Shelby started producing Cobras, he took a defunct British car, put a Ford engine in it, and said, "This'll work."
Under Shelby's direction, the small staff at Shelby American transformed the little underpowered Bristol into the quintessential American race car. Each car was hand-built, and legend has it that there are no two Cobras alike. Unfortunately, we'll never know if that part of the legend is true. Between 1962 and 1967, Shelby made just 1,011 Cobras, most with the high-winding 289 engine. Of the 50 or so 427 Cobras ever made, only 3 are known to exist today. The sad part of that is very few people will ever know the joy of owning an original Shelby Cobra. But thousands of people today are paying tribute to the man and his car by building their own Cobra or buying a Y2K version of this legendary automobile. To understand why people still wait in line to get a car whose design is over 40 years old, we'll have to look at the real thing. We'll do that when the American muscle car returns. The first Shelby Cobra was born in February 1962 when a Bristol body and chassis was shipped from the AC Cars factory in Surrey, England to Carroll Shelby in Los Angeles. In less than 8 hours, Shelby's mechanics had installed a Ford 260 V8 and 4-speed transmission and were on the street looking for Corvettes. Within a year, Shelby had upgraded the car's engine to the new Ford 289. And the car now had everything that was on sports car lovers' wish lists. Light, agile, and extremely responsive, the Cobra was almost immediately successful on the U.S. road racing circuit. The Cobra was the perfect example of form follows function. It was a racing car, pure and simple. Anything that didn't help the car go faster or handle better just wasn't there. It had an aluminum body, 2 seats, a steering wheel, a racing suspension system, and as much horsepower as could be packed under its hood. Creature comforts were nowhere to be found on this car's option list.
Well, there's no question that the car was built for racing and then modified to be on the street, to be street legal. And by modified, I mean very little. There are no windows on the side. There's no top. There's no way to get out of the weather. The seats are way down low and bolted to the floor. There are no springs in them. This is a car where if there's a bump in the road, you're going to feel it. At 75 miles an hour, who cares?
By November of 1962, 8 copies of the Cobra had been built, and the car had been approved for racing competition. This was all Carroll Shelby had been waiting for. By 1963, the Cobra, with a 289 engine, had won 3 road racing titles and had a top 40 hit record besides. And somehow, in the middle of all this racing, Shelby American had managed to make about 200 hand-built street versions, which stickered for $59.95. The Street Cobra's short option list included a few chrome dress-up items, an AM radio, and a heater. But everything most people wanted in the Cobra was included in the base price. But in December of 1963, a 427 Ford engine, which had been sitting around in the corner of Shelby's race shop, somehow wound up inside a Cobra Roadster. This shot of brute horsepower turned the Cobra into the fastest American-made sports car ever, and one of the world's fastest cars, period. To find an original 427 Shelby Cobra these days, you have to look in places like the DuPont Registry, a marketplace for classic and ultra big-ticket automobiles. Automotive publisher and collector car authority Thomas DuPont regards the 427 Cobra as one of the most exciting cars in the DuPont collection.
This is a wonderful example of the Cobra. It's a 427 big block side oiler. It's got side pipes on it. It's got big wide tires on it. One of the interesting parts about this car is where the gas tank is and where the gas filler is. When some of the original Cobras were designed, they had a racing-style gas cap in the fender. If you went around the corner too fast, the gas would just leap right up the filler pipe and right out the side and all over the side of the car. It wasn't thought of as a really good idea for those people who like paint and finish on their automobiles. So they started to modify it. One of the ways they modified it is they just went in the trunk, cut the filler neck off, and refilled the body on the outside and put the cap in the trunk. They forgot that you might have to put a gasoline handle up underneath somewhere. So if you go into a big filling station with one of these great big handles on it, you got a real problem. It doesn't quite make it. One of the interesting parts about this car and Cobras in general is they're very hot when they're running. If you're wearing sneakers, your feet are going to get hot. It's a very thin aluminum firewall between you and the engine. And if you step outside the door on this car and you manage to put your pant leg too close to the side pipes coming out the side after the car's been running, it can get pretty toasty and melt the polyester in your socks. They're flat, low riding. They're not built for 6'9" guys, but they're a blast. They sound great, and they'll go from stop to full speed in a heartbeat.
In its short 5-year lifespan, Shelby's little Cobra would race wheel to wheel with the world's most exotic cars. In addition to the Roadster, Shelby also created the Daytona Coupe and a lightning-fast mid-engine version called the King Cobra. The Cobra's battles against its bitter rival from Detroit, the Corvette, are part of America's sports car racing heritage. But without a doubt, the Cobra's greatest legacy is its legion of devoted fans. During the 60s, hundreds of thousands of young sports car lovers watched the Cobras on the track and dreamed of one day owning one of their own. But Shelby never made enough to go around. So in the same spirit that created the Cobra in the beginning, these Cobra lovers made their own.
It was kind of a boyhood dream when I grew up in the era of the Shelby Cobras, and got to the age a few years ago where I wanted my dream car.
We'll see the dream and meet some people who made their dream come true when the American muscle car returns. If you ever see a Cobra on the street, don't bother asking if it's an original. It probably isn't. You see, with only 1,000 ever built, well, they're sort of rare. Just to illustrate, this line of Cobra replicas is more cars than Shelby American Racing turned out in their first year of building Cobras. That's not good news for people who have a passion to own a real Cobra today. But Cobra lovers will all tell you the same thing. When you have a passion for this car, the only fix is to own one.
Well, I decided I wanted to do it about 15 years ago when I saw an original one, and I probably, like anybody else, said someday I will own one of these things.
For years, would-be Cobra owners were just out of luck, unless their budget could accommodate a car that cost almost $500,000. But now there's some relief for their condition, thanks to a few companies who are helping people achieve their dream. Brett Everett is Vice President of Engineering for one of these companies.
It's a rare, exotic car. The originals maybe go from $300,000 to
$500,000, it's completely beyond the reach of an average person. So what you can do with a kit car, it puts this exotic car within the reach of the average guy.
The originals are so far out of reach financially to a lot of people. I felt that that's the best way to go about it is to get a replica.
Today's Cobra replica can be a faithful reproduction of the original piece. With correct weights and dimensions, exact body contours, and right-on copies of the frame and suspension, well-engineered Cobra replicas have recreated the look and the excitement of the original car. By substituting less expensive fiberglass for a mega-dollar aluminum body and updating a few braking and handling pieces for safety's sake, a Cobra replica can be an affordable fulfillment for this long-awaited dream. For some, like Steve and Carol Holbrook, this is a dream shared between husband and wife.
I've been with my husband since high school, and he loved them then. We had friends that had one even way back then. It was relatively new then, 67, 66, and it's always been his dream, and I just kind of rode with it. And finally the kids are grown, and it's time for Mom and Dad to play, and there it is.
Once people have achieved their dream of ownership, they find another pleasant side benefit, the brotherhood of the Cobra. Today's Cobra owners enjoy a special fellowship through their love for the car and its heritage, and through the common experience of building one.
It was really nice. I pulled up and guys came over and offered cleaning solutions and rags and started cleaning on the car and helping me. Never knew the guy before in my life.
You know, everybody seems to have the dream. You know, everybody's classified as wanting one or wanting to know what it is. And then there's the ones that get them started and really can't finish their dream. Then there's the ones like here today that have had an opportunity, by the grace of God, I guess, to be able to finish theirs. And it really becomes a family.
Building one of these cars can be just as exciting as owning and driving it. Starting with a dream and a bare chassis, the Cobra lover's imagination takes over as the car takes shape. Just as in the early days, today's Cobras are individual works of art, and no two are alike.
We did things a little bit different on our car than you see on a lot of other Cobras, but each one of us does things different. So every Cobra's a little bit different and pulls out the I guess your personalities or whatever.
But just making the decision to build your own car can be traumatic. We'll see whether this is a good idea or not when the American muscle car returns. If every muscle car owner had to build their dream car from the ground up instead of buying it in one shiny running piece, there would probably be fewer of them on the road today. It is a testament to the love people have for the Cobra that so many people choose to build their own. Fortunately, many of today's Cobra kits have engineered much of the stress out of building the car. Still, though, there are some precautions that need to be observed.
I probably was ready to make one of the biggest mistakes, and that is not to investigate companies, not just the quality of their product, but how they treat their customers once they've walked out the door, whether they're buying a turnkey or buying other pieces from them.
The first decision prospective car builders should make is how much of the construction they actually want to do themselves. These days, some companies will do most, if not all of the construction, according to the customer's needs. The old joke about needing a degree in mechanical engineering isn't true anymore.
This is one car we're kind of proud of. It's got a lot of nice components on. Aluminum block 427 engine. Very high horsepower engine. I believe it's been dyno tested about 650 horsepower. Tubular front suspension with the coilover shocks for adjustable ride height and spring rate. You'll notice it has the real knockoff wheel spinners. 12-inch brakes with the racing-type calipers on them. Your radiator is an aluminum high-efficiency unit for adequate cooling of the big engine. Has a high-flow electric fan on it. We're running the Richmond 5-speed transmission. That's a very heavy-duty 5-speed transmission. It has a 1 to 1/5 gear and a very aggressive first gear, so you can get very good acceleration off the line performance and at the same time use perhaps a 3.0 rear end ratio for good highway economy. The rear end is a 9-inch forward-faced, fully independent. We have the nodular 9-inch center section here. The geometry of the suspension is pretty much like a Jaguar. It has a lower arm with a trailing link, the dual coilover shocks, similar to the Jaguar suspension, the inboard disc brakes. These are 11-inch ventilated disc brakes. Again, we have the real pin drive spinner for the wheels.
If a person does decide to do most of the work him or herself, they find out quickly that it's a lot of fun and a lot of work. But a project like this can be a creative exercise and good old-fashioned garage therapy. Greg Balkanoff built his Cobra from the ground up and had a great time doing it.
When you have a stressful job, it's just great to get out on the weekends and maybe turn some wrenches and create something, which I thought was great to do. And I knew the project would be nice at the end, and it's a sports car, one of the only true muscle sports cars left, I think, and I really enjoyed it.
Jeff Adler doesn't claim any special mechanical skills, but the Cobra he built is as close to the original racing Cobras as he could make it.
I'm really not mechanically inclined. I didn't do any of the internal engine stuff. I had somebody do that, but to drop a motor in and just place bolts where bolts are supposed to go, it really is simple.
Above all, there's no substitute for experience. Those who have built a Cobra are happy to share their experiences with people who are thinking about taking on this project.
Go to some of your major car shows and talk to some of the people that have already built cars and get an education that way. And it's up to the individual, and a lot of individuals don't have the time, they have the ability or whatever, and then if you do have the ability, it's a great project for the weekends or evenings or whatever.
And finally, when it's all done, the payoff is one of the most exciting moments in a Cobra lover's life, as Ham Todd recalls.
The day that I picked it up, I'll never forget the morning that I rode up, because it was the first time I'd actually seen it all together, raring to go, and seeing it sitting out front with about 5 or 6 guys polishing it, and it was sitting there idling, and it was just kind of a, there it is.
Not many real-life experiences live up to people's expectations, but a ride in a 427 Cobra comes way high up on the short list of those that do. When you finally get a chance to jump in a Cobra and take it for a ride, it's a feeling that very few cars ever made can equal. That's when people start using the A word.
The car is awesome. A lot of horsepower, a lot of torque. Something like the Viper. However, the Viper, I think, takes it to one more step as far as civility.
The Cobra is a car that will literally do just about anything you ask it to. Driving this car is a no-limits experience that was once reserved for race drivers and fighter pilots. In a car like this, one needs to be extra careful, especially in the rain.
It's a little hairy when it's raining, and a lot of hairy when it's raining a lot, because they ain't got no top.
A few modern supercars today offer a little more refinement, maybe a smoother ride along with performance. But part of the Cobra's appeal is its down and dirty approach to going fast. While the Viper might be a sharp instrument, the Cobra is a hammer.
The Viper, basically, you look down at the gauge as far as how fast you're going, and you can't believe you're over 120, 130 miles an hour. This one, you feel it.
People who have built their own Cobra will tell you that the excitement of the project comes in stages. There's the initial quickening of the heartbeat when you first see the car, the lump in the throat when you decide to do one of your own, and the long hours in the garage, punctuated by flashes of delight when something you fabricated turns out better than you expected. But when you can see the light at the end of the tunnel, when your baby is about ready to roll out, that's when the excitement reaches its peak. After 5 years of working on his Cobra, this is where Andy Botwick is right now.
40 years I've lusted about cars. I've never done anything with cars before except maybe change my own oil. And a friend of mine built one of these. I saw it, and as soon as I saw it one day, the light went on, and I said, that's what I got to do. Now that the kids have gone and the dog has died, I look for something to spark those creative juices once again, and this is really wonderful. And I love acceleration, and the exhilaration of acceleration. I think this is going to do it for me. I mean, just look at that car. I mean, that looks like it's speeding as it's standing.
Andy's even got his first ride in the car all planned out.
I'm going to take my best girl for a ride. I mean, I'm just going to enjoy it. I plan to drive the pants off of it and drive it all the time.
Maybe it's not just the Cobra that's awesome. Maybe the owners are a little bit awesome themselves. You gotta admit, they sure look like they're having fun. Thanks for watching. And remember, don't crush them, restore them. For many Americans, and just about every baby boomer, the 60s started right here with their first glimpse of the Corvette Stingray. When the '63 Corvette Stingray hit the streets, people would stop and stare as it went by. Even people who didn't particularly like cars liked the Stingray, because this was much more than just a car. It was a statement.
You're looking at a car whose lines had never been emulated before on the American highway. It was the execution of design, the balance, the line, and it was the right car at the right time for this emerging youth market who suddenly recognized this is something I've never seen before.
Since its introduction 10 years earlier, the Vette had become the American sports car. It even held up well to the finest European sports cars in every comparison, from performance to luxury to quality.
It's the American dream car, the sports car. It's still the sports car of America. And I've traveled to different countries, and you say sports car, and they say Corvette.
The 61 and 62 models contained a few hints of things to come, but nobody knew just exactly what Chevrolet had in mind for the Corvette for 1963. It was, to say the least, revolutionary.
It was ripe for the times, so to speak. The styling was fresh. It set the automotive world on fire.
Car buyers showed their fascination for the Stingray immediately. Chevrolet sold twice as many 63 Stingrays as 62 Corvettes. The 63 was also the first Corvette to sell out its yearly production run. And for the first time, there was a waiting list for Corvettes at the Chevy dealerships across America. Between 1963 and 1967, the Corvette Stingray became the best-known American car worldwide, and one of the best-designed cars ever built. The Stingray's basic design was the engineering platform for all Corvettes until 1984. Even more amazingly, the Stingray became the first American car to achieve classic car status. By 1972, only 5 years after the last Stingray was built, the car had already begun to appreciate in value and was beginning to be sought by collectors and museum curators all over the world. It's no wonder people who own Stingrays today feel like they're not just car owners. They feel like keepers of a piece of automotive history.
When you start the engine and you feel the response of the pedal, it becomes just special. It just does. You feel the slight vibration through the steering wheel, the going down the road, the appreciation. People parting way in traffic for you just to get a better look at it. It's very special, definitely.
We'll trace the Stingray's development from little runabout to world-class sports car when the American muscle car returns. In the early 50s, America's automotive taste could be described in two words: more and bigger. And nobody did more and bigger better than General Motors. And the head of their design department, Harley J. Earl.
Few people in General Motors have ever welded as much power as Harley Earl did. He literally invented the concept of design as a continuing marketing opportunity for an automaker. He built the GM Design Center himself, literally. So Harley Earl was a man with great vision.
One of Harley Earl's greatest passions was the Corvette. He had designed it and kept it alive through its shaky early years, and was determined that it would become a great sports car.
Well, Harley certainly had a lot of hand in keeping the Corvette alive because he had a personal stake in it. He also had a couple other angels like Ed Cole, who wanted to see this car survive because they believed the concept was solid.
By 1956, the Vette had begun to develop into a true sports car in both looks and performance, with a new body and power from the new 265 cubic inch V8. Corvette's engineering was now in the hands of a man named Zora Arkus Duntov.
Zora Arkus Duntov is a fascinating individual. He was a tremendous engineer. When he began to be involved in the Corvette, that's when you began to see the significant changes, like the camshafts, the racing, the ability for the car to sustain itself in a competitive environment and be a winner.
1957 was the year the Corvette took off, both in the marketplace and on the racetrack. Corvette was now a prestige car, not just for its owners, but also for General Motors. Upon Harley Earl's retirement in 1958, his protege, Bill Mitchell, became the head of GM Styling. As much as Harley Earl represented the 40s and 50s school of design, Bill Mitchell was a man of the 60s. The Stingray would be his pet project.
Bill Mitchell was as flamboyant as Harley Earl. However, he had a totally different style. If you want to compare Harley Earl to Bill Mitchell, Harley Earl liked nice rounded forms. Bill Mitchell liked sharp creases.
Mitchell's ideas were new and fresh, and the Corvette prototype cars produced in his Skunk Works were out of this world.
Being the car enthusiast that he was able to get his hands on one of the SS Sebring mules from 1957. And he designed a new body for that called the Stingray. Put that on himself and drove it around, raced it a little bit. But what everybody didn't realize is he was actually tipping his hand. He was showing you some of the styling cues that were going to become the 63 Corvette.
When the Stingray was finally unveiled, the automotive world took a deep breath. The new Corvette announced to the world that the door had officially closed on the 50s. And if this car was an indication of things to come, the 60s were gonna be fantastic.
This was the awe car. I mean, it goes by, you just go, oh, I wish I had that. Wish I could take a ride in one of them.
While the motoring press struggled to find enough superlatives to describe the Stingray, car buyers all over America lined up at the Chevy dealers to place their orders for the new Vette. We'll take our own test drive when the American muscle car returns. Before 1963, all Corvettes had been roadsters. Now there was a coupe to go along with the convertible, and it would become one of the most memorable cars ever made. The Stingray's body contained a number of unique details, from the nose with its hidden headlights to the rear deck, which featured the car's most distinctive element, the split rear window.
If you look at a 63 coupe, you'll see that there's a feature line that runs from the top to the back. He thought that it accentuated the fastback, and Zora absolutely hated it. Absolutely hated it. There were so many heated, let's call them arguments, between Zora and Mitchell regarding putting this on. The compromise was Mitchell got his way for 63. 64, the split window, was gone, and it never came back.
However you felt about the rear window, the first time you slid into the 63 Stingray, you were aware that this was a much different car than any previous Corvette. The interior updated the Vette's dual cockpit design with large, easy-to-read instruments and hand and foot controls that were all in the right place for aggressive driving.
It's just a great ride. It's one of those cars that you go down the road, it's a classic, and it just feels good just to be in it all the time.
If it seemed like you were sitting lower than in previous Corvettes, you were. A completely new frame moved the cockpit lower and farther back. This gave the Stingray a lower center of gravity and gave the car a 49% front, 51% rear weight distribution. The Stingray's wheelbase was also shorter than the previous Vettes by 4 inches. All of these changes contributed to the new Vette's excellent handling. But the most valuable player in this handling team was the all-new independent rear suspension.
Zora definitely wanted to have an independent rear suspension. He knew the benefits in terms of handling, cornering, ride. The independent rear was a significant milestone for American engineering.
But no matter what reason a person gave for buying a Corvette, at the bottom of it all was performance. The car, which got better every year, got a lot better in 1963. With the improved handling from the all-new chassis, there was no need to upgrade the Vette's powertrain. The same engines, transmissions, and rear-end ratios available in 1962 were available on the Stingray, but the new car put the power to the ground a lot more effectively. The base engine was a 250 horsepower 327, and 3 other versions were available in 300, 340, and 360 horsepower. The 3-speed manual trans was standard, but most folks opted for the 4-speed. The Powerglide automatic transmission was also available and actually outsold the 3-speed. Drivers found that the Stingray delivered everything they could hope for in a performance car. The higher horsepower cars would run 0 to 60 in under 6 seconds, do the quarter mile in 14.5 at over 100 miles per hour, and handle with an E-Jag, and still get around 13 miles per gallon in town. All in all, the 63 Corvette Stingray had done the impossible. It had taken the car that car lovers all over the world had called perfect and had improved upon it so much that 1-year-old Vettes now looked almost antique. Faster, better handling, with vastly improved creature comforts, all at a base price of around $4,400. So far, the 60s were turning out to be a pretty cool decade. We'll get deeper into the 60s with the Stingray when we return on the American Muscle Car. Someone must have hung a sign in Corvette's design studio that said, "It's working, don't mess with it." Because when Chevrolet rolled out its 64 models, very little had changed, except that darn bar was gone from the rear window. The purists were sad to see it go, and the rest of the almost 23,000 people who bought Corvettes that year just enjoyed being able to see out the rear window for the first time. A few minor cosmetic changes were made, but all in all, Chevy knew when to leave well enough alone, with one exception. Zora Arkus Duntov never left well enough alone. The top-of-the-line 327 was now a no-prisoners performer, cranking out 375 horses. This was the most powerful production small-block engine ever produced by Chevrolet. Power like this didn't come cheap, however. The upcharge for the 375-horse engine was a tidy $538, or about 1/4 the cost of a '64 Bel Air sedan. Along with the new horses, Muncie transmissions replaced the Borg-Warner 4-speeds, and the ride was improved thanks to new shocks and springs. The Vette's cockpit continued to fit drivers like a glove.
It's surprisingly comfortable. It really is. This car sits relatively slightly higher than people imagine, and you do have an easy exit, easy entrance, and it rides really, really well. People say, oh, that's a rattle trap, it's a plastic car. And when they get out of my car after I give them a ride, they're smiling, and they just said they had no idea.
Posting quarter-mile times of around 14 seconds flat and 0 to 60 times of just a shade over 5 seconds, the 64 Corvette continued to be the class act among American performance machines, even in the face of the new wave of Detroit performance machinery debuting that year, the muscle cars.
When the muscle car movement began in 64, it didn't impact the Corvette because the Corvette had already established itself. If you were a bag boy at Safeway, okay, and you saved your pennies, you could go out and you could buy a GTO, okay? You had to be the manager at Safeway to be able to go out and buy a Corvette, okay? So consequently, the twain never met.
1965 and 1966 saw the Corvette Stingray develop even further into the car that could challenge the greatest names in the automotive world. The hood was smoothed out, and for the first time, the Stingray sprouted little gills on its sides, which in the coming years would become a styling element as strong as the early Vette's coves. As a direct result of Duntow's racing activities, the 1965 Stingray received its first all-wheel disc brake setup, which effectively doubled the car's already excellent stopping power. And in the never-ending quest for more horsepower, Chevrolet found room under Stingray's hood for the new 425 horsepower, 396 cubic inch big block engine.
Fuel injection had been able to push the small block up to 375 horsepower, but it was extremely expensive, and only 771 units were built that year. What really put the end to the fuel injection not only was the difficulty in servicing, but the introduction of the big block engine into the Corvette. For almost half the price of the fuel injection, you could get big block torque, big block horsepower, and it almost immediately signaled the demise of fuel injection.
The 396 lasted just 1 year in the Corvette, but the big block was there to stay. The mighty 427 was Chevrolet's ultimate weapon, and when they put it in the Corvette for 1966, Chevy's little sports car became an all-world street muscle car. This power, combined with the Vette's excellent weight distribution and independent rear suspension, created a muscle car that did everything well, from racing to just plain looking good. Coming into 1967, Chevrolet couldn't build enough Stingrays to keep up with orders. We'll get in line for a test drive when the American muscle car returns. Zero to 60 in 4.8 seconds. 0 to 100 in 11.2. A top speed of over 160 miles per hour. For a sticker price of about $6,000. Any takers? In its 5th year, the Stingray had become the car every car lover dreamed of owning. And it deserved every bit of this respect. Searching for ways to improve an already just about perfect car, Chevrolet was down to things like moving the parking brake handle to a more convenient location, making the backup light a little larger, and making the gills a little smaller. 4-wheel disc brakes were still standard equipment, and to everyone's delight, the side-mounted exhaust pipes were still available. Engine choices remained practically the same in '67, with 5 available power plants. There were 2 327s, rated at 300 and 350 horsepower, and 3 427 big blocks. The 4-barrel engine made 390 horsepower. The 2 high-horsepower engines sported 3 2-barrel Holley carburetors. The 400-horse engine was a 10.25-to-1 compression unit, and the bad boy made 425 horsepower with 11-to-1 compression.
Everybody wound them out to 7,000 and 8,000, including me. A lot of these engines have since broken or blown up. These cars are hard to find with the original component engines. There's a few around, But basically, the horsepower generated from these engines is awesome.
But after 5 years of the most advanced engineering and styling input, even Zora Arkus Duntov was ready to move on to another platform. Calling the Stingray a fully developed car, Chevrolet turned its attention to the next generation Corvette. This one again based on a Bill Mitchell styling exercise called the Mako Shark.
When the Mako Shark was first shown in the national car shows in the mid-'60s, it was an instant hit with those high fender lines and that low hood and the very wide body and accentuated fender lines. That signaled that this was going to be a new generation of Corvette.
The next generation Corvette would pick up where its predecessor left off and continue the tradition of excellence, innovation, and driver pleasure. It would also continue the Corvette's tradition of getting better every year.
This car said, I am totally new design-wise, and it was. It was a little more aerodynamic, it was a little more balanced, and of course the T-tops and the sailback window was also something that was new for Corvette.
The next generation Corvettes, from 1968 through 1982, owed a lot to the Stingray's engineering. Thanks to the excellence of the Stingray's original design, it used the same platform as the Stingray all the way through 1984. An amazing engineering achievement. Today's Corvettes are light years ahead of the early vets in engineering, but the way their owners feel about them is the same as it's always been.
When you see a car and it makes your heart go thump, thump, you know that's the one.
A lot of people who buy Corvettes eventually find themselves caught up in the Corvette lifestyle. These folks are passionate about their cars, and it becomes not only a car club, but it becomes a social club. It becomes people who share your lifestyle, and you build it around your Corvette.
We were part of a group that traveled to Disney to the Corvette show up there. We drove up there with 8 other Corvettes, and so just cruising along, and people notice you.
Words can't describe it. I love when I get the car for the day because you just turn the little extra key to full, so it has full power, and you go. And you don't have to worry about traffic, you don't have to worry about stopping because the car goes and it stops just like you need it to, and the corners are great.
Of all of the things which happened in the amazing decade of the 60s, surely one of the most delightful was the Corvette Stingray. Chevrolet built almost 120,000 Stingrays between 1963 and 1967. And if you were lucky enough to own one, you know the joy that owning and driving this car can bring.
On the weekend, it's a lot of fun. If you take it out and take it down the road, it takes you back 25, 30 years, and you only need a few minutes of it, and you're good for a week.
For everyone else, the dream still lives on. Such is the legend of one of the greatest American performance cars ever built. We'll see you next time on the American Muscle Car. And remember, don't crush them, restore them. The Z28 was born with one purpose: to win the Trans Am Championship. Today, over 30 years later, it's still winning. For muscle car fans, the mid-'60s were a golden time, propelled by the all-out racing competition between Detroit's automakers. Racing created a parade of cars that every year got faster, handled better, and delivered more pure driving pleasure. By the mid-'60s, the car wars were being fought on every front. Buyers could choose from racy full-size cars, lightweight intermediates with massive engines, or the new wave of stylish sporty cars, led by the Mustang.
Now, the Chevrolet Camaro came about in response to the overwhelming success of the Ford Mustang. Ford had a tremendous head start. By the time the first Camaro came out in 1967, Ford had already sold over 1 million Mustangs. So they had to play catch-up in a hurry.
The Camaro rolled out at the beginning of the 1967 model year. Its styling was in keeping with the long hood, short deck pony car format. But unlike the Mustang, the Camaro was designed from day one to accommodate any engine in Chevrolet's inventory. This ability to wrap Chevy's largest engines in such a light package made the Camaro an instant muscle car.
A buyer could walk into a Chevrolet dealer, order a Camaro, and then just get a tremendous variety of options. Everything from inline six-cylinder engines all the way up to screaming big blocks to Z28s, custom interiors. Basically, you name it, you could get it on a Camaro in the first generation.
The Super Sport Camaros with the big block engines grabbed all the headlines in the auto press that year. But Chevrolet had something else in mind for the Camaro. Very quietly, in a move practically unnoticed by anyone but the sports car racers, Chevy announced an option to the basic Camaro, which offered a number of heavy-duty handling components. This package also included a new engine, the 290-horsepower 302 small block. The whole thing was called Special Performance Package Z28, and it was created for one purpose: to beat the Mustang on the racetrack. The Z28 was more race car than street car. The way it accelerated, cornered, and stopped made it the perfect car to go after the Mustang, which, at the moment, was the class of the field in the newly created Trans Am Racing Series. The Mustang had won the Trans Am Championship in 1966 without any real competition. In 1967, the all-new Z28 team of Roger Penske and Mark Donohue entered the fray and won 3 races. Mustang took the title again that year, but the Camaro team now knew how to play the game. During the next 2 seasons, as the Trans Am Series became increasingly popular, the Z28 blew everyone else away. Chevy's little factory race car dominated the series, holding off a huge effort from second-place Ford, and full assaults from Dodge, Plymouth, and American Motors. Meanwhile, out on the streets, the Z28 had been discovered. Muscle car fans were delighted to find a Camaro that sold for slightly more than an SS350, ran the quarter mile within 0.2 of an SS396, and went around corners like a Corvette.
It's a pretty neat little car in an era where bigger and bigger blocks were, the norm. It was kind of a throwback, a real sophisticated little small block that ran real high.
Today, more than 30 years later, the Z28 is still a great ride. Whether it's on the racetrack or the street, the Z28 gives its drivers the thrill of all-out performance every time they slide in behind the wheel. We'll take you on one of those rides when the American Muscle Car returns. For a while, it looked like Chevrolet was going to ignore the pony car phenomenon. Chevrolet already made America's best-loved sports car, the Corvette. They also had a sporty little compact car, the Chevy 2 Nova, that ran like a jackrabbit when equipped with a high-performance 327. They even had an engineering breakthrough car, the Corvair, which in Monza Spider trim was as sporty as anything from Europe. All these models, in addition to the Super Sport Impalas and Chevelles, the darlings of the muscle car crowd, made Chevrolet's lineup pretty full.
Start with the new Mustang 2+2 Fastback.
But the pony car thing was here, whether Chevy wanted to play or not. So within 6 months of the Mustang's introduction, Chevy got busy. Their design centered around a one-piece unitized body with a separate front subframe, which allowed the engineers to optimize the car's front suspension. And since this front subframe cradled the engine, it was designed so that anything from the 155 horsepower six-cylinder engine to the mighty 450 horsepower 427 could be interchanged, a fact that was immediately apparent to street rodders and racers everywhere.
The most noticeable styling elements, like the spoilers and the cowl induction hood and things of that nature, were actually developed by Chevrolet Engineering for use on the racetrack. So this is actually a case where the spoilers and the scoops and all those things really come from hardcore engineering to make the cars perform better.
With all the hoopla surrounding the car's debut, including being chosen as the pace car for the 1967 Indy 500, the Camaro was a high-visibility item. Still, though, the Mustang was outselling all other pony cars combined. And some people at Chevrolet were convinced that this Trans Am racing thing had something to do with it. So, within 2 months of the Camaro's introduction, Chevy's engineers were hard at work making the Camaro not just legal, but competitive in Trans Am racing. Unfortunately, GM's brass frowned upon any kind of factory racing involvement. So, building a factory race car was, to say the least, politically incorrect.
General Motors, as a company, was not actively involved in racing. Therefore, all the development work that took place on these cars, and it was a tremendous amount of development work done, was somewhat clandestine. But make no mistake, the idea here was to build as fast a car as possible and outrun Ford on the racetrack.
The centerpiece of the Z28 option was the all-new 302 small block. The 302's bore and stroke of 4 inches by 3 inches meant this little engine would be a screamer. Into it, Chevy poured TRW 11-to-1 pistons, forged rods, a 485 lift solid camshaft, bigger push rods, a Holley 780 on an aluminum intake manifold, and the Corvette cylinder heads with 202 intake valves. The advertised horsepower was 290 at 5,800 RPMs.
The 302 engine was actually rated at 290 horsepower by Chevrolet. By the time you put headers on it, open exhaust, the over-the-counter camshaft, some of the other pieces would actually make 450, 460 horsepower.
All these trick high-performance parts were available for a package price of $358. There was another $400 in mandatory options that a buyer had to check off, such as the Muncie M21 close ratio 4-speed trans, quick ratio steering, and power disc brakes. But still, the Z28's bargain basement price was the deal of the century. The first Zs went into production in December 1966. And by the end of 1967, they had made 602 of the little jewels. Out on the track, the Camaro team of Roger Penske and Mark Donohue won 3 races and were very quietly becoming Trans Am's super team. In 1968, Penske, Donohue, and the Camaro would own Trans Am racing. Stay with us as the Camaro takes the gloves off on the American muscle car. Chevrolet was delighted with the Camaro's first-year sales. Over 200,000 Camaros went home in the hands of lucky buyers in 1967, making it one of Chevrolet's most successful new car introductions ever. So, rather than reinvent a pretty nice wheel, Chevy merely corrected some handling problems that 67 owners complained about and made the usual minor trim changes on the 68 models. One of the few shortcomings of the 67 Camaro were its single-leaf rear springs. So for 68, Chevy replaced these with much stiffer multi-leaf units. And it staggered the rear shocks to help control axle hop on acceleration. After the strong showing the Penske Camaro had made in '67, the Z28 was starting to get some good press. People were starting to talk about this little Camaro in terms once reserved for the Corvette. Chevy decided to make the Z28 a little more dressy in '68. Z28 identification badges were added, and front and rear spoilers became available this year. A huge favorite with the street crowd, the Z's front-to-rear racing stripes were also continued in '68. Again in '68, the screaming little 302 engine was the piece that made it all work.
The SCCA changed the rules in 1968 to allow multiple carburation. In response, Chevrolet designed this 1968 Cross-Ram 2 4-barrel intake manifold. It's more commonly seen on '69 models, but it was indeed available on '68s over the counter.
Now, with some seat time in the Z28, Mark Donohue and the Penske team began feeding information back to Chevy engineering on ways to improve the car. Stronger spindles and a larger front sway bar were developed. And in a move designed to help the racers, Chevy now offered optional 4-wheel disc brakes, which gave the Z28 braking performance equal to the Corvette.
One of the SCCA rules mandated that everything that was on the race car had to be available to the general public. Now, to a street guy, that was great. All the camshaft design, all the exhaust design, all the special parts generated for the Z28 program were as close as your local Chevrolet parts dealer.
From the first green flag of the '68 racing season, the Penske team took no prisoners. They ran away with the series championship, winning 10 out of 12 races, and winning 8 of these in a row. Back in the corporate office tower, the GM executives applauded their little factory racer, despite their no racing official policy. Also in '68, a Z28 won the NHRA Superstock Championship in a final race between, you guessed it, 2 Z28s. After such a fantastic year, you'd think that Chevy would relax and rest on their laurels. But that's not how they play the game at Chevrolet. Stay with us as the Z28 roars into 1969, its best year ever, when we return on the American Muscle Car. From 602 Z28 sold in 1967 to 4,199 sold in 1968. And now, Chevrolet Division General Manager Pete Estes predicted Chevy would sell over 25,000 Z28s in 1969. The actual figure would be closer to 20,000 by year end. But this optimism clearly indicates how much this little car had endeared itself to Chevy's management in just 2 years. And why not? The Camaro was clearly one of the most popular cars Chevrolet had ever built. And the Z28 was the most exciting Camaro, at least according to people who had driven one. In its first 2 years, the Z had outperformed Chevy's most optimistic sales forecasts, wiped the Trans Am tracks clean of Ford products, and had even cleaned up on the drag strips. So, now what? Well, if you're Chevrolet in the late 60s, the only answer to that question is, now we improve it. Chevy's first facelift of the Camaro was a subtle work of art. From the fender lips, to the sharper nose, to the restyled rear quarters, it was enough of a makeover to keep Camaro fresh and exciting in its 3rd year. The car was 2 inches longer and 1.5 inches wider this year, and it wore it well. There were now 3 Z28 option packages. They ranged in price from $506, which included the front and rear spoilers, to $758, which added dealer-installed exhaust headers, to $959, which added the Cross-Ram induction setup to the other options. When combined with the other popular Camaro options, such as power steering, brakes, radio, and trim and interior groups, a Z28 could easily cost over $5,000. making it one of the most expensive Camaros you could buy. Under the hood, very little changed this year. In fact, there wasn't much left to add except hardcore racing parts. There was a new Go Real Fast solid lifter camshaft, which provided 493 lift on the intake side and 512 on the exhaust, and a new engine oil cooler. All Z28 engine blocks now had 4-bolt main bearings and thicker main webs.
Another thing that you'll notice on this car is the ZL2 ducted hood, which everyone calls the Cal induction these days. But it was RPO ZL2. Mates up to the air cleaner right here with that rubber seal. When you shut the hood, the seal seals the air cleaner to the hood. And, of course, the engine gets to breathe fresh air from the back of the hood.
Going into its third year of Trans Am competition, the Z28 was the tough kid in the playground. But Ford was seething over its loss of the Trans Am Manufacturers' Championship, and they were planning a little ambush. To regain their dominance in Trans Am racing, the Boss 302 Mustang was built according to the Z28's formula. Ford loaded this new car down with every factory high-performance part in the catalog, then put together a blue-chip racing team. Ford's team was fielded by longtime NASCAR team owner Bud Moore, and his two Boss Mustangs were driven by George Follmer and the legendary Parnelli Jones. Trans Am racing was due for some fireworks as the Penske-Donahue team squared off against Bud Moore and Parnelli. Stay with us as we go to the races on the American Muscle Car. In its 5-year history, the Trans Am Series had changed from its silk scarf weekend racer beginnings into a bare-knuckles brawl between corporate giants. The 1969 season was going to be the shootout at the OK Corral between Ford and Chevrolet. Both the Penske Camaro team and the Bud Moore Mustang team had done everything possible to give themselves an edge, but the cars were still practically identical in performance.
We're the first one to come out, you know, with the lug nuts fastened to the wheel. I never will forget, on the pit stop, Roger Penske sitting back way over somewhere with a pair of binoculars trying to see how we were putting them wheel and tires on, making about a 25-second stop for 4 tires back then, and taking them a minute and a half and 2 minutes, you know. I never will forget that.
When the final checkered flag fell, the Penske Z28 had captured the championship again, winning by a narrow margin over Parnelli Jones and the Boss 302 Mustang.
They had the best circuit in the world going with the top drivers all over the world. And Penske and them, Penske tore them up bad with the Camaro.
The 69 Z28 occupies a special place in American automotive history. It would take a truly spectacular car to replace it in Chevy's lineup. And as you might expect, that's just what Chevy had waiting in the wings. Once again, Chevrolet had created a milestone automobile. Tony Rowe is a Camaro restorer who prefers the second-generation Camaro's body style.
Second generation is my favorite. By far, I think they're the best body style, the best design, the best body contours, the interior roominess. Is much more than your third generation, your fourth generation, your first generation. I like them, but overall, your second generation to me is the more finer Camaro that General Motors produced. The early second generation car from 70 to 73.
Even though the new 350 cubic inch LT1 small block was rated at 70 horsepower more than the 302, the Z28 didn't repeat its Trans Am championship this year. With the Penske-Donahue Super Team now fielding AMC Javelins, there was no more backing from Chevrolet as in years past. Parnelli Jones and George Follmer cruised to an easy Trans Am title for Ford in 1970. As the 70s progressed into the era of unleaded gas, one after another, the supercars from the muscle era dropped off the automotive radar screen.
Your Holly 780 went by the wayside in 72, and your horsepower rating was 245 for that year. which is a dramatic decrease from the years of 1970, 71. 72 was a car rated at 255 horsepower, but the components that were inside the engine and the drivetrain were all still good quality parts. Positive traction rear ends, turbo 400s for your automatic cars, 4-bolt main engines, forged steel rods, forged steel cranks, forged aluminum flat top pistons.
On a few occasions, the Z's future looked doubtful, but there have always been enough dedicated, loyal, and very vocal car buyers who insisted that America wouldn't be as much fun without the Z28. Thankfully, Chevrolet agreed and kept the Z28 alive through several designs. Each Z28 was a car for its times, and each one was a cut above the ordinary, like they always have been. So the Z28 lives today in much the same form as it did in its early years. It's still powered by Chevrolet's most potent small block engine. It still corners like a slot car, and it can still blow the doors off anything that dares pull up next to it. And at age 30 plus, we should all be so lucky. Thanks for watching. We'll see you again on the American Muscle Car. And remember, don't crush them, restore them.